All right. Hopefully we've come to a critical mass and all of you are ready to embark online. We're going to do this via Zoom, which I wish we were all in a classroom setting together, of course, but it is good to be here with all of you this morning. Let's see if we can navigate through this. If I go into presentation mode. All right, my name is Tom Hoffert, and I have the opportunity to serve as the president of the Oregon Lacrosse Officials Association, also in partnership with the OHSLA and Commissioners Schlesinger and Gruen, and all the work that that group does to make sure we have a safe and productive season for our student athletes. I know many of you, the vast majority of you are parents, and I appreciate your volunteer spirit. Getting out and participating in the lives of your children's high school sport experience is something I think that you all will enjoy. For those who've not yet volunteered as a table individual. Oh, I'm getting more feedback. Hold on, I'm going to get out of this. And really need people to mute themselves if you are coming on the call. It'll be challenging for the group to get through if we're not all muted. Okay, I think we're back on to almost everybody. As I mentioned, it's a great opportunity for you folks to get out and share some time with your kids. If your guardians are like, thank you for your service. You guys are getting a great seat, and being able to be at the table this year will be extraordinarily unique as well. I think it's going to be a pretty special year, given that there are going to be restrictions on likely the number of fans in certain stadiums, depending on the county risk levels and the like. And so serving as a table volunteer is kind of your free ticket into the show, no matter what. The role of myself in this is as in partnership with the OHSLA officials, we're tasked with really managing the rules and the game flow, keeping student athletes safe, and working with the coaches and the student athletes to make sure they have a positive experience. The training that we're going to go through today is intended to give you some hints and some great tactics for how to manage the volunteer role at the table, whether it is as a scorekeeper or a timekeeper, any of those roles that you're going to be asked to do. I myself am not a parent, but I work with table staffs year in and year out. I've had the opportunity to officiate collegiately, professionally, and in high school a lot of times. So hopefully you recognize me, or if you haven't seen me before, please say hi, that you went through this training course. We very much want, if you have questions along the way, utilize the chat menu, or even come off mute and ask the question. It's much different than being in person, where I can kind of gauge how the audience is feeling and if everything's being absorbed. But thank goodness, nothing we're going to do today is life or death. We're not delivering babies or back surgery. It's how to prepare yourself to be a great volunteer at the table and make sure the game goes seamlessly, because even though you're a volunteer, you do have a really key role in making sure the lacrosse game goes smoothly. So I'm going to jump into a PowerPoint that we'll use kind of as our basis for conversations and topics today. You'll note that this is being recorded, and we're going to have this featured on the OHSLA website. If you do have someone who is unable to attend, you can forward that to that link, or they can access that link. One thing that is important is attendance at this. It needs to be recorded by the league. So I would ask that you go in to the chat menu and enter your name and the school you're associated with. and your email address. Those will not be used for solicitation or anything, the league assures me, but rather just to confirm who is in attendance today. So if you're familiar with the Zoom platform, you'll know where that chat menu is. I see people are starting to do that. For those unfamiliar with the Zoom platform, on your bottom bar should be a little note that says chat, and just click that. A drop-down menu will appear on your right-hand side. As an example, I'm John Smith. I represent Lincoln High School, johnsmith@gmail.com. That's what we're looking for there. And at the conclusion of today's meeting, I'll stay on and just briefly record those. Although with 59 of you, I don't know how brief that will be, but happy to do it, and we'll get through things. So let's jump right in. Today, what we're looking to accomplish, and if you could, verify that you just saw my PowerPoint change screen. Can a few people give me a thumbs up if that happened? Are you now looking at an agenda screen? Okay, I see yes, it's good. So we've kind of have done a little bit of an introduction. We'll talk a little bit about our purposes and objectives today. Really, for the first time, one of the most key things we're going to talk about, and probably the most important, is the clear understanding of the COVID-19 protocols for this season. And much like your student athletes, being at the table as a volunteer is going to require some real thoughtful thinking on your end on how you yourself stay safe and limit the exposure that you provide other volunteers. We'll talk about some of the terminology that you're going to hear at the table, the role of a timekeeper, the role of a scorekeeper. We'll talk a little bit about where you're going to be situated, talk a little bit about practical applications, things that you're actually going to see and hear at the table, and then conclude with question and answers. I'll try and stay at a pretty good clip. I know for many of you, this is something you've learned in the past, and for others, this will be your first time. The great part is you're here and you're willing to volunteer and help out the league and advance the game. And for that, we're very thankful. So let's go through. We're going to talk, of course, about the COVID-19 protocols that the OHSLA has issued. And just so you know, if you have students in other sports, you'll find that this matches very closely with the OSAA. Although lacrosse is not a sanctioned school sport in Oregon yet, the OHSLA always fashions their protocol based on what the OSAA is doing. So that matches varsity football, varsity volleyball programs and the like. So you're going to see consistency there, and that's important. We'll talk about some of the things that we're looking for at a table. So no matter who is running that table, they have the opportunity, if you're at one school one week and then the next week you're at a different school, things look fairly uniform in what you're reporting. The legitimacy, of course, you're creating a book that goes on record. And especially if you're the home team, you become the official book of that game. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Your expectations, what you're being asked to do, and also what you won't have to do, which is a little bit falls on the officials oftentimes. How to create a proper atmosphere, hand signals. I always say, unless you're familiar with them, you don't really have to pay attention, just listen, because the officials will speak to you as well as show the signs. There's no test at the end of this. So when we complete today, you're certified and ready to go. And so that's an easy follow-up, is just attending and listening, engaging when you have questions. And then each team last year was issued a scorebook. And the league, the OHSLA, has asked me to convey that those, since they were not used last season, as many of you recall, right around March 4th, prior to the season, we had the season canceled for high school. The league feels that those books hopefully are still in place with either the head coach or a key volunteer. And so those, for all intents and purposes, those books have already been handed out. If your team does not have one of those score books, please let your head coach know that you do not have a scorebook at this time. And they encourage the coach to contact Commissioner Rick Gruen, and that is through the OHSLA website. I know many of you probably have those books lined up right now. Okay, so let's dig right in. Understanding and adherence to the OHSLA/OSA COVID-19 protocol. All of this centers on risk reduction and minimizing exposure. So as volunteers, 100% of the time, and cannot underscore this enough, masks will be worn by all table and scorekeeper personnel. There was a question asked, I got emailed yesterday, hey, I've had my vaccine, am I exempt? And the league has very clearly noted that all personnel at the table, including coaches on the sidelines, your student athletes and officials, will be in masks the whole time. And so the expectation is masks be worn by table personnel as well. There is noted in the Oregon Health Authority has a medical exemption. Should you be one of those with a medical exemption, you would need to coordinate that before the season starts or before you are in service at a table with the OHSLA league office. So they want to, of course, emphasize that you would not come to a table and say I'm exempt on the day of with no prior discussion. That would need to, any medical exemption, of course, would need to be cleared with the league itself. So ask you to not surprise any officials or fellow volunteers and show up feeling you don't need to wear a mask, because their role will be to enforce the mask policy of the league. And it's an important note that all the coaches in the league were asked this poll, and responses were given that 100% they're in favor of masks throughout this whole season. So this is really a communal effort. Each team this year will be limited to only 2 table volunteers at a game. So some teams have in the past have had a scorekeeper, a timekeeper, and maybe a spotter. This year, due to exposure and risk management, each team is limited to 2 table volunteers per game. And they are not required to have 2. You can have only 1 and still be compliant, but very much important to not have more than 2 volunteers per team. You're asked to have pens, pencils, anything that you would normally pass between possibly different individuals, to have them be individualized. So you're not sharing of pens and pencils, erasers, things that essentially could be communicative back and forth between people. The league has asked that you have your own set, again, just minimizing exposure. And then at the physical table itself, in addition to the 1 volunteer from the home team, and the home team may have up to 2, as well as the visitors, the visiting team will be provided 1 seat at the table. So at a minimum. And I haven't seen too many tables that really can fit 4 people across. Usually it's 2 or 3 at the most. Want to make sure that each team has at least 1 seat at the table, and the home team would then get the 3rd seat if there is room. Thus, if the visiting team has a 4th individual, they may need to stand adjacent to the table. That's not too unlike other years, but when we're limiting the number of table volunteers, we wish to be very clear that the visiting team will have a seat at the table sitting down, so they can keep their scorebook accurately. It's very tough to do that standing up. Any questions so far? When I'm in this PowerPoint mode, I'm not able to see the chat. So chime in if there's a question. Yes.
Tom, I do have a question. I'm sorry, because I didn't do the scorebook yet. You just said only 2 people were allowed from each school, but then you said the home team can have up to 3. So can you clarify that?
I'm sorry, I did not mean to say that. The home team and the visiting team are limited to 2. So if I said that is incorrect. Allow me to correct myself. It would be 2 per team total. And in this, as far as the seating arrangement, sometimes the home team wants to grab the 2 seats, And we want to make sure that at least one person from the visiting team is afforded a sitting seat so they
Okay,
can do the scorebook. My apologies if I said 3.
I may have heard it wrong. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on COVID-19 protocol? Really want to emphasize that masks are non-negotiable. Please don't make it contentious. I know there's a lot of ideologies out there. People who feel they've, done the vaccine or whatnot. It just really needs to be not a contentious issue when it comes to masks. The league is requiring this of everyone. And so we would ask your compliance there.
I have a question.
Yes.
A lot of schools have the time in like a box area. Thurston High School, we have a times board that we roll out. Would we be allowed to have our 2 people at the table and then the time person away from the table?
I don't see any thing that would suggest that can't happen. I'm a representative of the league, but not a league officer. I'm just in charge of officials. So why don't you inquire with the league on that? It seems logistically there would be no other way to do that. I have been at Thurston a couple times. I seem to recall. Is this at the sports complex?
No, it would be at the high school.
At the high school itself? Okay. Yeah, I mean, if they're separated out, I don't see a concern. What we're mainly focused on today is the table itself that is directly on the field in between the 2 student athlete teams. So I would think that if there's a separate place where time is being kept, for instance, a crow's nest at Lake Oswego or Glencoe, I mean, those type of situations, there's no issue there. What we're speaking direct today is the table that's on the field near the student athletes and the risks that are associated with that.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other COVID-19 questions? Okay, let's jump into the stuff that kind of helps us get through the game here. So important part of this is the officials are in charge of the field, sidelines, and spectators. And very seldom has this happened, but as a table crew, you are a key part of the volunteer effort to make a game go smoothly. But we wouldn't definitely want to make sure you're not extending yourself beyond those duties. It's not a time where you're going to be telling players or coaches what to do, how to act, and the like. Please allow the officials to do that. That's mainly just to keep you in out of the line of fire. Sometimes even if you're right, doesn't mean it's the right time to act. Just want you to this would be one that we'd ask kind of stay in the lane. You are there as a volunteer and to help, but we really want to make sure that those who are officially approved to be disciplining, penalties, and the like, you allow them to take on those responsibilities. And know that the official association has a very, very close relationship with our coaches. A number of the coaches in this league I know very personally through lots of years of service together, and it's a very healthy relationship. I know when you look at national sports on TV, at the professional level, you see a lot of poor decorum between coaches and officials sometimes, and the OHSLA and the OLOA are very proud of their partnership, and we count on the coaches to be our partners, to keep temperatures on the sideline appropriate and communication appropriate. So in your role, we'd ask that you kind of allow the officials and coaches to manage the game in that way, and you help us out in the critical areas of timekeeping and scorekeeping and the like. You're an important part of proper game management and volunteering to assist the officiating crew and teams, and you really are there in servant leadership, and we appreciate that. If you are needing assistance or help, it's important to know when the proper times to do that are. Live ball play is very challenging for an official to circle over and take care of any issue at the table, short of real mischief breaking out, a physical altercation between players and the like. We would very much kill play during something like that. So if there is something that you're needing help with, possibly missed a penalty time, or the number of the player, wait till dead ball and then just call us over. Those of you who have been doing this many, many years, you remember that there is a horn that used to be sounded twice if you needed help from officials. Really don't utilize that anymore. We are, especially in varsity games, but certainly in JV, you have an official in front of you most of the game in that trail position. We're very easy to get a hold of. Just flag us down, go, Mr. Official, sir, or could you come help us real quick? And we can navigate those issues together. The key is to not have that happen during live ball play. You have no responsibility of administering or enforcing the rules. Partner with the officiating crew. So that ties in the message previously. As the on-field officials are a team and rely on each other, we also rely on you as scorekeepers, timers, spotters, etc. So you are an important part of this, and know that if you have not previously worked with officials before, if this is your first time working at the table, you're going to have a lot of conversations with us throughout the game. We're going to be talking about penalties, score, timing issues, etc. So mentally be prepared that, hey, I'm going to start to get to know these officials pretty well. And the vast majority of our troops, I feel, are really solid guys, and nobody is an official for the money. While we're compensated and we appreciate that, we do this because we love the game of lacrosse and helping the game be successful. Know that coaches will be asking you questions in certain situations, like how much time is left on a penalty, or how many penalties a certain player has, if they have any timeouts remaining, etc. Be aware of that, and you're going to be relied on for that information. You'll kind of get in the flow. First couple times it may be catch you off guard, but you'll get in the flow of how that works in communication with coaches. Know that sometimes the coaches are very intense and working through different scenarios on the field, off the field, and the like. So if you don't have an answer right away, say, hey, coach, I'll get you that information shortly, and compose yourself and take the time you need. They are great leaders. And as you all know, as parents, think of the amount of hours these men and women coaches put in to working with your kids. So if they are a little short or seem pretty intense to get an answer, do your best to help them out as quick as you can, but stay within your capabilities. If you don't have the answer right away, you can always circle back with them as quick as can. And then you'll see this a few times in the presentation. Enjoy the best seat in the house. I actually say the second best seat in the house. I feel us as officials definitely have the best seat, but gosh, to be sitting right at center ice, at center turf is absolutely fantastic as a volunteer. Certainly a lot better seat than up in the stands. Any questions on that slide? And again, I apologize if you're just joining. While I'm in this PowerPoint mode, I cannot see the chat menu. When I pull out of this, I can answer anything that's been fed through the chat menu. Okay, home team table crew is responsible for recording scores and penalties. So you will certainly have from both the home and visiting team, 2 different table personnel people and running 2 different books. We love when your books match, but 100% of the time, the home team is who we're going to be coming to for as what's called the official book for the game. So if you're the home team, know that you are keeping the official league records, and those will be submitted by your coach after the game into the league portal. A lot of times, the trick I've seen is they just take a picture on their cell phone of the score sheet and then submit that to the league. I know some others scan and the like, but know that your coach is responsible for turning in the official score of the game and any issues that happen during that game. So if you're the home team, your book is viewed as the most important book. That doesn't mean a visiting team's book is not important, but you're the official league book. You're asked to kind of lower your allegiance to your child, team, and coaches during your experience at the table. So it's not a place where you're going to be cheering and rooting for your kids or yelling about stuff that maybe upset you or anything like that. I know you're all pretty smart to this, but really want to emphasize that while you're at the table there, you are serving as a league volunteer. And so don't want to hear you yelling for Billy to do real good from the table. It kind of creates a little bit of a contentious atmosphere, and we're looking to avoid that. So even if you're pulling for your kid, kind of keep it at a minimum and help the dynamic go along smoothly. This is a huge one, and really I think about us doing this presentation about 10 or 12 years ago. This wasn't even on our really radar, but what's the biggest trap? What are we always doing? I mean, I'm guilty. We all sit here, look at this all the time. When you're at the table, we really ask that you put your phone down, ideally upside down. I know that maybe you're expecting an impertinent work call or the like, but the reality is during that hour and a half, you wouldn't really be able to take that call anyways during a live game. Texting is actually the issue that probably comes up the most. We're all very used to just quick texts throughout the day. And I know it doesn't seem like too big of a deal to participate in that during live game. We just want to make sure you're not missing any parts of the game or recording responsibilities. So the league asks that you really minimize any work on your phone or social media during that time. You're there, as the league has said here, you're there to work in the best seat in the stadium. And so just kind of watch that activity to make sure it's not pulling you away from your duties as a volunteer. Inside, you may be cheering for your team. Your exterior is professional and courteous. I like that. And then the OHSLA requests you wear neutral colors, no team jackets or hats. I added in the line, this may not be a full reality there, but it is requested. Do I think you're not going to wear your OES jacket on a cold night? No, I think it's reasonable that you do that. We just don't want it to become a cheering section. Hopefully that makes sense to people. Any questions on that slide? Well, you guys are letting me off pretty easy so far today. We're flipping along really well.
There are no chat questions, Tom.
Yes.
There are no chat questions. You're good.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay, lacrosse terminology. First of all, let me give you some background on why this is important. And when you are recording at the scorebook, we're going to ask you to record goals, and I'll go over this coming up, but you'll be asked to record goals, assists, time the goal, and number the number on the back of the player who scored, etc. These terminology that we're going to go through, for some of you as veterans, hey, this is old hand, but know that some of the people on this call, it's going to be the first time they're going through this. And I really want to thank those of you that it's your first year or maybe your second year for doing this. We want this to be a great experience. And with that best seat in the house comes the ability to get comfortable in this role. Nothing replaces, as we say in our line of work, nothing replaces field time. And so for you folks, nothing is going to replace just actually going through a few games and getting used to it. But for those of you who are new, I hope you have a really good time doing this. You're going to learn each and every day. I fashion myself as a lifetime learner, and I know many of you do as well. So if I'm learning something new every day, that's very healthy. So don't feel you need to be the master of all this if you're starting out, but these are things that are going to be good for you to be aware of and slowly start to digest as your experience moves forward. So what is considered a shot? A shot is considered a ball propelled toward the goal by an offensive player, either being thrown from their cross itself, kicked, or otherwise physically directed legally. So that is a young person shoots a shot, it ricochets off the elbow pad and then in, deemed a legal goal. So a shot, again, is thrown at the cage, and we're not going to try and be too good. If the young person is taking a shot, not all shots are going to be successful. So just because it doesn't go in doesn't mean it wasn't a shot. The goal is when the ball propelled by the offensive player actually goes into the goal itself. So much like in sport of basketball, where the ball enters the hoop and through the net. In soccer, the ball enters the goal. In football, it's kicked through the uprights. The goal in lacrosse is just entering the net itself. And for those who are not familiar with the sport of lacrosse, it's a very different field layout than most other sports. Closely aligns with hockey, and where you can go behind the field, behind the goal, to have active live ball play. An assist is a direct pass to a teammate who scores without dodging or evading an opponent other than the goalie in the crease. There is only one assist per goal. And for some of you like myself who come from the ice hockey world, we award 2 assists in ice hockey if it came from 2 different players consecutively. That is not the case in lacrosse. So there's only 1 assist possible on a goal. And some goals will not have an assist at all. So those are things we can deeper dive if people want some clarity. A goalie save is a ball that is stopped or deflected by the goaltender using the cross or any of his or her body parts when that ball would have otherwise entered the goal. And you'll note my little in parentheses there, don't be too good. So, and I'm sure if you have heard me say this in past years, but imagine a profession where the greatest player in the sport, his save percentage, his career save percentage was 0.66. So basically, 1 out of 3 shots he allowed a goal on. And that's the world-class numbers. Most goaltenders in the sport of lacrosse are going to have a save percentage around 500, sometimes considerably less, depending on, as a goalie would say, how good his or her defense is playing in front of them. So knowing that a goalie is going to give up quite a few goals, saves are a very big deal for goalies. And so if a shot is a little outside of maybe going on goal, but the goalie reaches up and grabs it with his stick or deflects it with his chest protector or whatever, we're going to give him that save, right? So if you see a shot on net that is saved, the league and quite honestly, humanity would ask you to give that goalie a save. They just don't get that many opportunities to do so. That doesn't mean we're going to give fictitious stats that aren't true, but if a young person propels a shot on goal and the goalie finds a way to save that and not allow it into the goal or past the goal, let's make sure to give that young person that save. Ground balls. This is when a ball comes in possession of a player contested by an opponent and the player controls the ball for passing, shooting, or cradling. During a face-off, we're going to credit the player gaining possession of the ball with a ground ball and the team with a face-off win. So there's a lot in that sentence right there. First of all, a little terminology. You'll hear GB. It's just a quicker way of saying ground ball. Lacrosse is not a sport that has tons of acronyms and special little words, but GB sounds for ground ball, and FO is face off. So you're going to see that a lot. When you have a face off, the 2 young people are going to go down and contest for the ball. The ball will be on the ground. It's not in the women's game. The ball is start up airborne through a face-off that some of you may have seen before. Looks very different than the boys and men's game. So that the ball is on the ground when it starts, we're going to award a ground ball to whoever picks that up and gains possession. And then that team will also have a face-off win considered for them if they get possession. It's entirely possible that somebody could kick the ball around, it goes around for 30 seconds without being picked up and is finally picked up. That is still, in fact, a face-off win, even if it takes a long time to get there. The face-off, the ball comes into possession of the team, which gains first possession of the ball. The face-off statistic is awarded to the winning the face-off is awarded to the face-off specialist, regardless if he, she, or a teammate gains possession. So let me explain that a little. There are times when a face-off man will go out and try and literally kick the ball or fish the ball out with their stick to a teammate. If their teammate picks up and gets possession of that ball, the individual taking the face-off still is credited with that win, not the wing player. So believe me, I understand there's some people probably watching this have no idea what I'm talking about. You will understand once you see a live game being played in front of you if you haven't had that opportunity yet. But it is, there's a lot of times that face-offs go into scrums that the kids are working their way around trying to get the ball fished out. It's ultimately the team that picks up the ball the first time and gains true possession. That is, they have it in their cross and can make what's called a lacrosse move with it. Sometimes it happens very quickly. The player gains possession and then it seems like almost immediately an opponent knocks the ball out and they get possession. That wouldn't qualify as a face-off win for the other team. It's who gains possession first. And a true lacrosse possession that we give the face-off win to.
Hey, Tom, before moving on to fouls,
Yeah.
question was, on a shot that dreams off of a pipe goalpost, is that marked as a save or is it just a shot?
That's a great question. It is not a save. And it's weird to think that, hey, we're willing to award a save when it's maybe at an angle and the goalie comes out and grabs the ball. The post is kind of seen as a neutral area. So if you shoot a shot and it hits the post, it is in fact a shot. But if you have a shot that occurs and it goes off a post and the goalie does not make any contact with that ball. So if the goalie cross were to touch it, it touches off the cross and then into the cage, 100% a save. But if a shot occurs, hits off the cage and the goalie did not have any influence on where the ball went, that is not considered a save. So yes, the posts of the goal are kind of a neutral area when it comes to saves. Great question. But again, if that young person did make contact with the ball first, either off their body or off a stick and then into the goal cage, we for sure would give a save on that because they directed the ball away from the goal.
Hey, Tom, a quick question. What you just said about the player gaining possession on a face-off seems different than what's written on that bullet on ground ball. So if during a face-off, it sounds like we should credit the player who actually gains it, not the player who was taking the face-off. Is that correct?
No, the face-off player who the two, let's just talk in a high school game, the two young men who are down for the face-off at the start of the face-off. So the two face-off men, one or the other will gain possession, will be credited with a face-off win. It just means that a wing player could come in and grab the ball. The wing player isn't who gets credit for the face-off win. It's the face-off man.
But the wing player gets credit for the ground ball. Is that
100%?
okay? Okay.
Also,
It's
Tom, you
follow-on.
say a goal is propelled by an offensive player. Any player can, right? If a defenseman passes to his goalie, the goalie misses the pass, it goes into the goal, it still counts, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that statement that says offensive player under goal, can be any player.
Technically, if a defensive player were to gain possession, throw it to his goalie and it goes in the goal would be credited to the player closest to the goal. It does.
Okay.
Thank goodness it doesn't happen too
It is
often.
not a stat in defenseman one.
I'm sorry.
Hey, and Tom, another follow-up question from your chat. Ground ball is one. The defense dislodges the ball. The ball is on the ground. Same team that just lost the ball picks it up. Do both players get a ground ball?
No. So
Both from the same team. Does
if
possession have to change?
possession needs to change before there would be award of a ground ball.
Thank you.
Okay,
Tom?
can I go back to the defensive goal? A defender accidentally gets it in his own personal goal. The goal is credited to the nearest offensive player.
The nearest offensive player to the goal crease, correct.
Okay,
Hey, Tom,
And that happens maybe one time in 2 seasons. So thank goodness you won't have to deal with that too often. Yes,
question on what differentiates a goal. Is it just crossing the goal line, or does it actually have to go into the net?
net does not have anything to do with it. Net's more protector for the ball to not continue on the field. The goal, so for instance, very misunderstood thing, a goalie can actually have the ball in his cross. A goalie could have the ball in his net itself and accidentally bring the net backwards, cross the full goal line, but not drop the ball and bring it back out, and that is not a goal. So it is a little confusing how you get a goal, and you'll never have to worry about it because the officials will blow the whistle and signify goal. That's the only time you'll have to worry about that. So you don't really have to master that rule, but to be a legal goal, the ball has to cross the goal line, and the ball has to be completely over the stripe across the goal crease. It can happen in the air, but eventually the ball will come down. It will either go into the net or touch the ground inside the goal crease. The one exception is what I mentioned, would be a goalie making a save or whatever that drew his cross back across the goal line with the ball in possession in his net. That is not a goal, but you will never have to worry about that. Officials will provide you the signal for a goal or no goal. Any other questions on that? Okay, let's jump into some cursory overview of fouls. So in the sport of lacrosse, you have technical fouls, you have personal fouls, and then 2 variations of the personal foul. You'll have a releasable penalty and a non-releasable penalty. Technical fouls are 30 seconds in duration. Personal fouls can be 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3 minute fouls. The officials on the field will dictate what the foul is and the number and the amount of time that the player will serve, and they will dictate whether it's a releasable penalty or a non-releasable. Now, the bottom 2 are very important to just kind of understand. If we were to have a personal foul, let's say a 2 minute cross check that got up high on the neck versus a slash for 1 minute, we're going to come over and say 1 minute slashing, and that is automatically a releasable penalty. When it's non-releasable, we will tell you. So if we don't say non-releasable, know that they're releasable penalties. Your pretty standard penalties you have in the game of lacrosse are slashes, moving screens, loose ball push, and those that will never even have to come over to the table. When you get into, like the holds and the like, we'll come over and report a 30-second penalty or a 1, 2, or 3 minute. Thankfully, the young people take pretty good care of each other, so we don't have to go outside of the 1 minute penalty too often. When we do, it can be releasable or non-releasable, and please know that if it's non-releasable, we will tell you that. Finally, team clears. This is a stat that some of you will elect to keep on behalf of your coaches. That's when a player gains possession of the ball in their defensive end and successfully transitions the ball into his team's attack box on the other end of the field while keeping the ball in possession. So a ball that just trickles over the midline is picked up by the other team and brought right back into the attack zone that they were just in. That's not a team clear. A team clear is a great statistic that shows you the success of your defense and defensive middies. If you gain possession of the ball in your defensive end and successfully transition it all the way up into your attack end, which is basically for those of you, the 30-yard line in a football field or under. That is credited with a team clear. Again, not a required stat, but certainly one we can touch base on if you're so inclined.
Hey, Tom, quick question on the fouls. I'm a little bit dusty now that it's been a couple years, but I recall a couple years ago we were adding time and a half onto the penalties, I think to account for the fact that it was running time. Is that something that we're still doing?
Yeah, we're going to go over that under coming up. That's for
Okay.
JV games. So there's not a varsity scenario. So if you're doing a varsity game, there will be no time and a half ever, even on running time clock. But for JV, because they're running time games, penalties are what's considered time and a half, just because by the time the clock is not dead when the penalty is being reported and all this stuff occurs, so they do time and a half. But yeah, we're going to cover that coming up.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Okay, so the shot rule. This came into effect 3 years ago. It followed the collegiate game, which I think is always very smart. But this is just a refresher, and this is as much for officials as for all of you in learning. A shot that is released from a player's cross prior to time expiring remains a live shot, even if the horn is sounded to end the period. What I liken this to is, and for those of you who are not super familiar with the game of lacrosse, is think in basketball. A player comes up to the 3-point line as, 3, 2, 1, and they go and shoot, and the ball is out of their hand before time expires. They still count that basket if it's made. It's the same exact rule in lacrosse. So as time is expiring, 3, 2, 1, and the player shoots the shot and the ball is completely out of their cross, and then the time expires, that ball is still a live ball. Here's the scenarios that it will stay live. So the shot is completed, it's completely out of the cross and enters the cage. That is a goal. The shot is out of the cross and deflects off a defensive team's body, helmet, stick. That is a good goal. So imagine 3, 2, 1, shot is out, heading towards goal, hits off the elbow or the shoulder pad of a defensive player and then goes in the goal. That is still a good goal. Here is where that changes. If that shot is out of the cross before time expires, but it hits off of an offensive player, so one of the shooter's teammates, that immediately kills the play. Shot not released completely from the stick when time expires, that obviously kills the play as well. Not super important that you deep dive this rule, because the officials will make the call on the field as to whether the shot was out of the cross or not and completed legally. But I think it's very fair that we make you aware of the rule, because sometimes, you get down to those final seconds and it can be very confusing if you don't have a cursory understanding of the fact that we do have a live game until if that ball is out of the stick prior to time expiring. Any questions on that?
Just simple. You would record a shot if it doesn't go in, and you would record a save as well after the buzzer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Game tips. I like this section. I helped craft this one. Okay. Highly recommended you arrive to the table 20 minutes prior to the start of the game. Pack a comfortable folding chair in your car just in case. We've all been to an event where you were expected to have a seat and suddenly you get there and there's only 2 chairs and you're the third person. Throw a chair in your car just in case. Bring a coffee with you, a blanket, water to sip on, whatever supplies you need, whatever you need to complete your task. I think you just keep it in the back of your vehicle, and then you always have it there. During lacrosse season, aside from the stuff personally that I'm washing after games, I keep all my gear in my car. That way I can never be accused of forgetting stuff at home like we all do. So if you put a little Scorekeepers box together in the back of your car with your blanket, maybe a pillow to sit on or whatnot. Some of those chairs are pretty hard bottoms. just think of the little things that are going to make your experience a little easier for you. You know, having a soft drink or a coffee, whatever you like there, keep you warm. Even those little hand warmers have been pretty helpful to people. I know that some crews really get into it. I've seen a couple of our ladies at McNary, they always bring their full heater and everything underneath. Hey, more power to you. As long as it's not getting in the way of where the kids are substituting in and out, I think it's great. But be self-sufficient. Don't expect that the other crew team is going to have extra supplies for you, if you would. The table crew should never leave the table scorebook unattended. And this is the great Dan Batter's line. Would you leave your baby behind? Of course not. So at halftime, it's often a time for people to take a little potty break or, you know, circle around, go behind the table, make a couple cell phone calls, whatever. The home book needs to always be in your possession. The reason for that is, and we certainly want to always think the best of people, but we'd never want the scorebook manipulated by somebody coming over to the table and maybe adding a goal or two and creating a situation. So in a perfect world, we'd ask you to really keep a good eye on that home scorebook. Visitors, I always say, hey, if it's good habit for the home team, might as well be a good habit for the visiting team too. But the home team book, given that it's the league book for that game, we'd ask that you never leave it unattended behind where somebody could gain access to it. Maintain a calm demeanor when performing your duties or requesting information or clarity from officials, coaches, and players. Just kind of, I like to think people never remember necessarily what you told them, but they'll always remember how they felt around you. Be somebody that people really want to work with in the game and be enjoyable, professional, and have a good time out there, but remain calm. Even when, you know, the coaches or players are excited, we're going to count on you to have a pretty smooth demeanor throughout the game. Focus on the work at hand, timing, counting down the end of penalties and quarters, and then really refrain from texting while working as a table volunteer. Be aware that when the game time is maintained at the table, officials and coaches will be requesting time updates very often. That's for those stadiums that have no visual time clock. It does happen on occasion. And there are a couple teams that do not have access to the timing devices at the stadiums or fields they play on. So sometimes the time will be kept right at the table. If you're thinking of what's a real world application, most of your kids have probably played in a tournament or two in their lives. At a tournament, you know, you got 8 fields. There's not one timing device. So the time is being kept at the table. And if that's the case, that you're at a game where your time is being kept at that table, know that since we as officials, coaches, and players do not see the time, we're going to be asking you the time often. So just be aware of that. Effective for last season and effective this season. Last season that we didn't have, but was keyed up to be a rule this year, will be a rule, is all stick violations are 2 minutes long. So you may recall, those of you who've done this a few years, sometimes it was a 1 minute penalty, sometimes it was a 3 minute penalty. US Lacrosse in their wisdom said, hey, all stick violations, so deep pocket, pinched head, no tape, all those things, those this year are all 2 minutes in length, and they can be fixed immediately. So those of you who are old timers, you remember, hey, I got to protect the stick. I can't let anybody touch it till after the game. I got to keep it here in front of the table. That has gone away. All stick violations are 2 minutes in length, and they can immediately be addressed by coaches, players, or whoever wants to come grab that stick to try and fix it. This is going to help you guys out a lot. Just one less thing that you have to worry about. So all violations may be addressed immediately and fixed immediately by the coach or player. This means no more keeping the stick of a pinched head at the table for the remainder of the game. Some of you will understand what I'm talking about there. Those of you who don't worry. You never had to learn the old way. Just know that if any stick violation comes over, the young person or a coach can begin working on that stick immediately.
Tom, is that a releasable or non-releasable?
Stick penalties are non-releasable. And we'll make sure to tell you that. Okay. All right, timekeeper role. Keep an accurate account of the game time. For varsity, it's 12-minute stop time games. For JV, they're 15-minute running time games. Please keep an accurate count of the penalty time. Inform the penalized player when their penalty time expires. As a rule of thumb, if it's a 30-second penalty, when you're down to 10 seconds, the young person is in front of the table there, you say nice and loud, 10 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. So it's not 2, 1, 0, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. And you need to say that at a volume that both teams can hear that. We don't want to be in a trap situation where you're just talking to the young player in front of you, where the two coaches can't hear the countdown. Now, I understand if it's loud and you're doing the best you can to be loud and express that countdown, great. But what we don't want is one team knowing the player's release and the other saying, hey, I didn't hear the countdown at all, because know that teams are adjusting their offensive defense in anticipation of that penalty releasing. If you can remember, notify officials that there's 30 seconds left in each period. So when it counts down, hey guys, 30 seconds left, just a minor little note. If you don't remember to do it, don't worry. I train our officials every day. It's their job to know the time on the clock. Keep an accurate account of intermission time. So between periods is about 2 minutes. You don't have to worry about that, but at halftime, it is 10 minutes long. And there is a key important part to, you have a role during halftime. At the 4-minute mark of halftime, you're going to sound the horn at the table. What that does is most teams will gather and kind of down towards their own end zone area on a football field, or kind of far down the other side of the bench. They're not seeing how much time is left. So when they hear the horn, coaches know I have 4 minutes left before the game's going to resume. It's a courtesy we do for coaches and players, and we'd ask you at the table to manage that. But do know that an official will be probably standing around to remind you in case you're going to forget. But you can always impress us and go, I got this. 4 minutes, I got you covered. If timing is not being run at the grandstand or booth, sound a horn at the end of each period when the game clock reaches 0. So this is very seldom, but some, again, those stadiums that do not have access to the timing devices on the field will utilize the horn and the timing at the table. So somebody is going to need to sound the horn. It's not a time at all to get strategic or loose. You want to, when it counts down to, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and on 0, you're going to sound the horn. Not at 3, 2, 1 horn, and not at 0, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and then a horn. It's just right on the 0 mark. And even if something's going on, sound that horn when it reaches 0, because we need to have the integrity of timing in the game. Call over an official or sound a horn twice during a dead ball should there be an early penalty release violation. This is a little bit of advanced math, but I'll give you an overview. Sometimes young people will release themselves early from a penalty, and you're like, wait a second, I didn't release them. Note the time on the clock that it occurred. That's very important. Just jot it down in pencil or pen on the book in a blank area or column. Don't interrupt play. You're not going to kill a live ball situation. And then at the next whistle, just sound the horn twice, and the official will know, boy, we must have had an early release or something. The official will come over and explain, hey, player number 8 headed out of the box before his time expired. I did not release him. That's all you'll need to do. The official will take it from there. What we'll do is the young person will have to go in and serve the remaining, whatever they left maybe 8 seconds early, they'll serve the remaining 8 seconds plus an additional 30-second penalty. We will explain that to you as officials. You're not going to have to worry about managing that. Your job is just to notify us of an early release. One important thing to note, that if they release themselves early and a goal is scored by the offense, it's actually going to waive off their time anyways. So, but again, allow the official to tell you that. You won't have to memorize or learn that rule, but I do want you to have a cursory understanding, again, because I fashion myself a little bit, that we are kind of all learning some of these things together. Any questions on that last slide? Hey, we're getting close. Cool. Varsity game. This is going to go into the two roles of JV versus varsity. During a varsity game, and only in the second half, that is the third quarter and beyond, when a goal differential is 12 goals or more, we operate on what's called running time clock procedures. So imagine a game that a team is up 13-0, and we are in the second, let's say we're in the second half, maybe 5 minutes left in the third quarter. You will go to running time. It's kind of like a mercy time rule. And the confusing part is, hey, does it switch back and forth between run time and stop time? And the answer is yes. So at 12 goals, once the next faceoff occurs, we go to running time. Now, if the other team scores and suddenly the goal differential is only 11, we immediately go back to stop time. So we're going to communicate that as officials to you. And most of the time, pretty straightforward. If time is being held on the clock up in a crow's nest or at the table, it's being controlled. We'll just kind of talk through that mechanic prior to it happening. But it can go back and forth. So you could be 12 goals and you're on run time at the next face-off. They could even score another goal. Now it's 13-0, run time. But let's say the other team comes back, scores 2 goals, and we're back to an 11 goal differential. We will actually go to stop time right after that goal is scored. So it's kind of a back and forth system. You know, in application, there probably are not a ton of times that the 12 goals are reached and it goes back to 11 too often, but it could. Be aware of that. If it continues at 12 or more goals, you're going to stay on run time the remainder of the second half. So your periods will still stay 12 minutes in length. So it's not like we suddenly go to a 15-minute period because it's running time. The goal is really to assist in a blowout game to minimize risk and keep the flow of the game going. So here's the procedure itself. Once a 12-goal differential is reached at the next face-off, following the goal that created the 12-goal differential, you'll switch to running time clock procedures. When the official blows his whistle live at the face-off, start the clock, knowing the game is now running time. So even if a goal is scored, you will not stop the clock. The one exception is medical or timeout situations. So if the officials blow and say stop the clock, either due to an injury or a timeout by a team, we will stop the clock then. That is the only time. Otherwise, a goal is scored, penalties being administered, that clock is still tick, 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 tick running. As long as the goal differential stays 12 or more goals, the clock will remain in running time. And as noted, only team timeouts or official timeouts for injury will stop the clock. At any point, if the goal differential goes back to 11 goals, we will revert back to traditional varsity stop clock timing. If it becomes 12 goal differential again, we move back to running time. Sometimes we can go back and forth as needed. Again, and this is a huge point of emphasis because I've been asked this a number of times in the second quarter. Hey, we're on run time, right? It's 12 goals. It's only in the second half of a varsity game at 12 or more goals. Questions on that timing issue? Great. Role as scorekeeper. Keep a record of goals and assists for each team along with the time of each goal. Keep a record of the player number making the goal or assist. Check the score with the referee at the end of each period, connect and verify. I always like that. I'll just come over to the table. If I'm the R, I'll come over and go, hey, we matching. I got 6-5. You good there? Home team says yes. I'll always look to the visiting team. Are you matching? Great. Again, we love for your books to be matching, but the home team will be the true book. Keep an accurate record of timeouts taken by each team per half. Note the time in the game on the game clock when the timeout was awarded. This is important because teams are only allowed 2 timeouts per half. Keep a record of each player by number committing a violation. Also write down the penalty that is being reported. So for JV times, for JV games, know that we're in a running clock situation, so penalty time will be time and a half. How this would work out is, as an official, we're kind of a simple group, so we're not going to expect to be doing math too well. So we'll come over and say, white 10/1 minute. In a JV game, you're going to know that that young person is going to serve 1.5 minutes. In a varsity game, they would serve 1 minute. We're going to count on you to do the math. We're going to still report it like we're on a varsity game. So we're not going to come over and go 90 seconds. We're going to come over and say 1 minute, and we'll know that you guys are the smart ones and you're going to do the math for us at time and a half. So a 2-minute penalty would serve 3 minutes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, varsity game, second half, 12-goal differential, running time. Do we change the math on the penalties?
Nope. Only in JV games do we have time and a half. You could be on run time on a varsity game, and a 15-0 game, and a 1 minute slash is still going to serve 1 minute. So there's no change in varsity whatsoever. Great question. Where'd I go? Okay. Notify officials when any player accumulates 5 minutes of personal foul penalties. In a JV game, that's 7.5 minutes of running time penalties. This is not for a 30-second, like 2 30-second pushes, and then 4 minutes in personal fouls to equate 5 minutes. It's only in personal fouls. So the anything that's not a personal foul, 1 minute or more in duration does not count towards that 5 minutes. But when a player reaches 5 minutes of personal fouls, and by the way, officials will definitely have noted who that young person is by that point. That's quite a few minutes in penalties. Once that occurs, that player is disqualified from the game. They are not ejected. They're called, the technical term is disqualified. So if a player reaches 5 minutes in personal penalties, they're going to be out of the remainder of the game. You don't have to enforce that. We just need you to tell us about it in case we missed it. More than likely, we probably will know that that player is up to 5 minutes because that's quite a bit of foul time. Okay.
Hey, Tom, before we move on, is there any major difference between boys and girls with all of the rules and the tips that you just shared?
Oh, goodness. I think there's got to be.
Okay, so what we're talking about is mostly for boys. Is that correct?
Oh, no, this is 100% for boys.
Okay, I didn't know. I just was told to take this class.
Well, first of all, we're glad you're here. Second of all, I have many, many friends in the female lacrosse world that are incredible officials. I haven't the first clue about what their duties are other than game management.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Okay.
The women's game and the men's game are completely different games.
That's what I figured, but I'm in charge of both. So
okay.
thanks,
well,
guys.
only put on your boys lacrosse ears today.
Okay, thank you.
The good part is if you have young men coming up in your lives, these rules will apply throughout their entire. These rules are very similar whether you're at the high school, collegiate, or professional levels of men's. I have no clue on the women's side. I respect the heck out of the game, but I would never pretend to know a thing about what I'd be doing out there. So very different games. You'll notice the 2 red dots down here. This is the table area. I think the reason this slide is in is just to note, hey, this is the area you're going to be in. I would say this verifies that you have the best seat in the house. Table area is dead center on the sideline side of the field. So that means where the coaches and players are. And this area is kind of your area to manage and help us with. Quickly, I'm going to go through stacking, and give you just what you need to know. This is one of the most complicated rules in the sport, so I don't want you to think you need to be an expert in this. In fact, some of our younger officials, I guarantee they don't even understand it quite yet. We're working with them, but it's a rule that takes quite a few years to master. But stacking is something that does not happen very often, but it does happen. That's when 3 or more players from one team are all in the penalty box at the same time. The best part for you is the official will come over and tell you how to do it. So you're not going to need to know this, but again, in fairness to teaching the game, I want to make you aware of kind of how it works. If you're in a situation where, let's say, 4 players from the same team are all going off for penalties, let's say we had a skirmish and multiple players involved, only 3 players can serve in the box at one time per team. So what it means is that 4th player will go to the side of the box, and he has to wait until one or more, but at least one of the players who are currently serving are released from their penalty. At that time, that 4th player can now come in and start serving his penalty. His time does not start until at least one of the other players have been released. So you could have a goal scored and all 3 players are released for the penalty box, and now the 4th player comes in to start his penalty. So a goal, even if they're releasable penalties, a goal does not release all the players, only up to 3 at a time in the box. I don't want to go deep dive on this because this is a real challenging one, even for very experienced lacrosse people, other than to remind you that we will walk you through how to do it if it is going to occur. And just be aware that stacking is essentially a way to make sure game control is maintained. As you can imagine, you have a giant skirmish, and let's say 5 players from one team go off and 2 from the other. Now you got 7 people in a box. Only 3 of those from one team can serve at the same time. So it becomes a game management tool, because if a goal is scored and suddenly now all 7 players are released back out, what do you think is going to happen? Probably some more skirmishes and the like. So that's the reason behind stacking. And again, we'll walk you through that mechanic if it happens.
Question on that. Who decides who the 4th player is? Does the referee do that? Do the coaches? How does that determine?
Nope, 100% the referees will tell you who the 4th player is going to be, and how we base that. And again, this isn't something you need to log away and memorize, but how we adjudicate it is based on the severity of the play and the timing in which the occurrence penalties occurred. So if let's say in a perfect world, all penalties are 1 minute unsportsmanlike conducts, a bunch of guys shoving each other or whatever, and we decide to put them all in the box, the 4th player to have engaged would be the 4th player. So the person who wouldn't start in the penalty box. It also has to do with the timing in which they occurred. But again, probably something I don't want to dive too much in, not because you guys aren't all real smart. It's just a rule. It's a rule that doesn't happen a ton, and the officials have been trained very hard on how to properly adjudicate it. So your R on that game, which is the referee out of the 3 officials, will definitely be skilled on how to adjudicate that should it happen. Good. Okay. So here's what's required in the rule book itself. For goals, we need the player number who scored by quarter and by time on the clock. For penalties, we need the player number penalized, the name of the offense, i.e. like a push, a trip, a slash. So you'll note the offense that they committed, the amount of time served, 30 seconds, or 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, and the time on the clock when the penalty occurred. So in a stop clock game, you'd look and go, it's 7:30 in quarter number 2. In a JV, this is a little interesting. In JV, because it's running clock, the young person will come over to the box and it's like 7:30, 7:29, 7:28. When the next whistle sounds, that's when you write down that the penalty occurred. And the reason for that is now you know the number that you're basing their time off of when they're released. Timeouts, we need to know the team that was awarded the timeout, what quarter they had the timeout in, and the time on the clock when the timeout was called. Note, clears, saves, shots, ground balls, this is all extra and not required for the official scorebook summary. Many of your coaching staffs will ask you to keep these statistics, but again, these are not required in the league book. What is required is goals, penalties, and timeouts. How are we feeling so far? We're almost there. Here's what a scorebook looks like. Here's where you put the player names. One important piece is the player listed at the top must be in the starting lineup, and they must be an attackman. Okay. Why that matters is this player is going to serve what's called as the in-home for a team. And so if there are violations on the bench, coaches, etc., we refer to the in-home to serve that penalty. So the player at the top of the book needs to be in the starting lineup and needs to be an attackman. You have the home team visitors. So you would note, you kind of see some of the marks that you can put on here. So in quarter one, they played. John Smith looks to have had 2 shots and they had a goal and they picked up a ground ball. So John Smith's off to a good game. At the bottom here, you see with the timeout section. So on each side of your scorebook, you have the home team and the away team, or the away team and the home team. You're going to be able to note what period the timeout occurred in and what time on the clock it occurred in. Okay, we're about to hit through our summary. How does that sound? And then I'm going to pull myself off of the PowerPoint and we can take any last questions and get ready to go on our day. So quick review, respect all the COVID-19 protocols for table staff at all times. And this means wearing a mask 100% of the time. Home team scorer and timer are the official OHSLA stat book for that game. And you both are part of our officiating crew. The table is not a rooting section for your child or team. Remember that. It's not a time to chat or text with friends. You are there to work in the best seat in the house. Keep accurate game and penalty time. It's very important. Inform the penalized player when their penalty time expires. Announce 10 seconds. And very loudly, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. Okay, just practice that mechanic in front of your mirror a couple times and you'll have it down pat. Sound the horn at the end of each period or at the end of the game, depending on whether there is a audio sound system in play. If not, we're going to use that table horn for those end of quarters. Keep record of goals, assists, and penalties by player number for both teams. Arrive 20 minutes prior to the start of the game. Table crew should never leave the table and book unattended at halftime. And please remain calm with calm demeanor, or please remain, keep a calm demeanor, stay personable, be likable, be somebody people want to work with. Okay, so I think we got through all of our business there. I'm going to take this off of the PowerPoint. There's a ton in the chat. I assume most of them are team names and players, but why don't, instead of me trying to go through a whole chat menu, if you have questions or commentary for the group, why don't you jump in right now and we'll tackle them.
Hey, Tom. Share those notes. Oh, PowerPoint.
I'm sorry?
Can you share that PowerPoint?
Yes, the PowerPoint will, in fact, I think it goes live at 11:30 on the OHSLA website, but if not today, it'll come up quick for anybody to go through. But yes, that's available for everybody to review anytime they'd like. Looks like Raul, you have a question?
Yes, I'm gonna go back and when there's a face-off, a team face-off one. My question at, then the face-off when the player who does the face-off.
I'm sorry, Raul, your audio is really cutting in and out. Why don't you put it in the chat menu and I'll see if I can get through that.
Tom, I think it is in the chat menu. It simply is.
I did.
Oh, okay.
It's the last one in the chat. It's a simple, who gets credit for the face-off win, the team or the player who took the face-off to begin with for the team?
When talking about a face-off, you previously referred to a team face-off win. Is that a separate stat and the face-off win? No, the player who took the face-off for the team that wins the face-off will get credit for that face-off win. I can see where I may have been confusing on that. Yeah, it's always going to be the player who took the face-off. It may not be that player who ultimately picks up the ball for his team, but whoever gains possession of the ball the first time with a clear possession will be credited with the face-off win. And it will always be credited to an individual stat for the face-off man himself, even if he is not the person picking up the ball on his team. Any other questions? It looks like Shelley has a hand up.
Yeah, so there's 2 timeouts for each half. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And how long are the timeouts?
There's 60 seconds in duration, but you'll never have to worry about that. The officials keep the timeout timing on.
Okay, and I've kept books for 2 years, but last year with no playing, obviously I didn't keep books. Is it possible for you to put out an example of one of the games just so I can refresh on how it all is in the book?
Put out a, say that again, Shelley, put out a what?
Like one of, like somebody's game, an example of a full played game. So, you know, you can see all the markings, all the, you know, where you put the GB, and just to give me a refresher on an actual book of play, you know, the score sheet.
Yeah, I could add a picture of a completed scorebook, I think, to this PowerPoint.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, let me see what I can find from one of my coach partners who can send me a snapshot. I myself don't keep a scorebook. I'm 100%. I haven't coached in over 12 years now, but I bet I can find one that would be. You're just looking for, like, at the end of a game, what a normal scorebook would probably look like.
Yeah, I mean, just I've done it for 2 years, but just a refresher, so that way when I'm going to sit at the table, I just have it, you know, in my head of what needs to be done. And, you know,
Sure.
Once I look at the example, it'll just help refresh it for me.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll let me see if I can do that. Give me a couple days, but I can get that added. I'll reach out to a couple of my coaching partners that can send me something.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the group?
Yeah, can I just make a quick remark here? I totally agree with what Shelley was saying. I think the biggest confusion for many of the parents new to this, people doing the book, get with their coaches for sure and make sure their coach clarifies what they want and don't want and how to do it. I mean, every coach is a little bit different, right? But it's going to be by far the most confusing or difficult thing for many of us that are on here. You know, I've been doing it for quite a while, and every game it seems like there's questions, and coaches come back with questions of, you know, what were you
Well,
doing,
I
what were you
mean,
saying?
we've got you're right. Coaches are going to want different things, but we have what we have to put in the book, non-negotiable, is the goals, the penalties, and the timeouts. I mean, we got Coach Boz on here. Tom, what do you look for? What do you ask your parents to put in the book? Is it different than some of the things we talked about today? We're not hearing you, Tom. You're not on mute, but I don't know why it's not picking up your audio. Sorry to put you on the spot, Tom, by the way. But as a long veteran coach, that's what happens. I don't know why it's not picking up your audio. Yeah, okay, no problem. We're not catching Tom's audio, but I think that's a great idea to touch base with your head coach and see what they want. They're all going to be a little different, but we've definitely given you an overview of what the league needs today. But I appreciate that, Brad. Good comment. Any other questions from the group?
Yeah, I have one, Tom. Thanks for your time in doing all of this. IBW, for those who don't know, is Ida B. Wells Barnett. Wilson has been renamed, so we will slowly roll out our new name. The question I have for you is, we find it easier to have someone dedicated to the timekeeping of penalties, and that would be the third person. There's just a lot of moving parts, and because we're all a little bit rusty, not having scored in 2 years, is there any way to have, even if they stand off to the side and behind the table, to have someone who keeps penalty times?
You know, Wendy, I'm not going to be the one that can answer league policy. So I'm reporting the league policy. I think that would need to be, Wendy, if you are one of those that feel you need a third person, I need you to send the league that request.
Sure.
Again, I'm just from the Officials Association asked with the training. I definitely am not a policy maker on this.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Look at us, right at 11:30. Great job, everybody. Any last questions? Are we ready to roll? All right. Well, I want to thank all of you. I wish you all a tremendous season. I hope to see many of you out there. Be nice to your officials. They're pretty good dudes. And if they're not, tell me. Hopefully you guys all have a great year. I know this is a very shortened year for all of our student athletes, which is a bummer, but at least they get a little time to play. Help us in keeping a safe environment, and we'll look forward to seeing you all out there. Thank you for the time this morning, and have a great season, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.